The member for Riverina.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Whilst the Albanese Labor government will tell you this bill will help reduce red tape, there are many of us who suspect and know otherwise, and we cannot forget the hypocrisy that Labor has shown when it comes to all things tax. Now, on 1 July, the Assistant Treasurer, Minister for Financial Services, the member for Whitlam, announced significant new regulations and obligations for tax practitioners, planned to come into effect a month from then, 1st of August. This rushed announcement left many in the tax industry scrambling, fearing failure to comply by the starting date. And this is so typical of Labor. They tell you that stakeholders have been engaged. They tell you that stakeholders, people with an interest in these matters, have been consulted, and yet anything such as that is furthest from the truth. And it was just yet another example of Labor making the rules as they go along, making the rules for the big end of town. Huge multinational accounting firms would have had the capacity and resources to make the changes necessary to adhere to these new obligations. I come from a regional area, and the businesses, the tax firms, the accountancy practices in my electorate don't have teams of people, compliance officers, legal eagles and the like, to meet the obligation, certainly to meet the 4-week expectation by the government to adhere to the transformational, and I use that word perhaps unwisely, regulations that were being brought in. And I say unwisely because when you get transformational, usually it seems to be or should be a positive thing, and these weren't positive things. These were just more bureaucracy, more red tape, more onerous implications being placed on small businesses, and we've only had to look at a number of small businesses going backwards, going out the door backwards today in figures released overnight to see how badly small business is going under this Labor regime. Small regional accounting firms have already been inundated during tax season, would have had to face an unrealistic timeframe to comply with the new regulations Labor was introducing. Now, numerous concerns were being raised about these changes. It was only halfway through July, midway through the month, that the Tax Practitioners Board came out with further clarification, coincidentally stating guidance materials to assist tax practitioners in upholding new obligations were yet to come and were expected to be released, wait for this, in September. After considerable uproar and calls by the coalition to withdraw the changes and conduct further consultations, the minister, the member for Whitlam, made a last-minute decision the day before the changes were due to go into effect to extend start dates to 1 July 2025 for firms with 100 or fewer employees, and 1 January 2025 for firms with 101 or more employees. Now, this was a last-minute win for the industry and for common sense, but it was a stark reminder, a chilling reminder if you like, of just how poorly this government consults with industry and with stakeholders. This government, in this respect, has formed. The 72,000 tax practitioners across Australia deserve clarity, deserve better engagement from government when changes such as these are introduced. But you see right across the board with the tax changes that Labor has either made or threatened to put in place, and it's not just in financial services, it is, as I say, right across the board. It's in the such things as the biosecurity levy, call it a tax, call it what it is, that Labor was going to put on our farmers to pay for overseas goods to sit on the same shelves as our local homegrown products, and yet our farmers were going to be asked to pay for the biosecurity of their overseas competitors. I mean, what other country in the world would do that? What other country would expect its own farmers to pay for the biosecurity of their overseas competitors? It makes no sense. And then, of course, we had that real doozy where the government was going to put an impost on our farmers for the increased land valuation of their farms, and be expected to pay, even though it was not for sale, the incremental increase in the value of their land, pay the tax office because their land value had increased. I mean, these sorts of things are just nuts, particularly for our farmers. And land prices have been generally going up and up in recent years, and from, in some cases, a low base. But you take a farmer from the Murrumbidgee irrigation area whose holding has increased in price. Let's say it's doubled in value. Why should that farmer then have to pay an amount to the ATO simply because the value of his or her land has gone up, when they've just been hit with an unseasonable frost which has wiped out their grape crop? Or if they're a grain grower, likewise. They've just had their annual income just stripped, just wiped, and yet they're then expected, because their land value has gone up, that they somehow owe the government something, somehow owe the tax office something, that because the price of their land has increased. I mean, these are policies that are not well thought through. These are not policies that are made by people who have a sense and an understanding of regional Australia, of agriculture. And let's just not forget that those opposite, they just simply can't be trusted when it comes to tax policy. They simply can't. Well done to Labor for two surplus budgets, but not well done for the fact that those budgets have been not on the back of any economic rationality or policies, but on the back of the fact that iron ore and coal in particular, the prices globally are peaking at the moment, are at record levels. And it's nothing to do with the Treasurer or the member for Rankin's policies. It was on the back of some very hard and diligent work done by the former Treasurer, former member for Kooyong, setting in place the markers by which this government could then come in on the back of post-pandemic, once things settled in that regard, once the international borders were reopened, once the economy got back in shape, and of course record prices for those mining commodities. And then we, of course, have the Greens running around wanting to shut all mining down, full stop. And I see the member for Griffith just throw his head back and sigh loudly, but it's true. Our country, which once rode on the, and I'm sorry, I've now sort of stirred him into action, but our country once rode on the sheep's back, and wool prices kept our economy going very nicely, thank you very much. And in more recent decades, it's on the back of the hard work and determination and the sweat on the brow of our miners. And to think that we have a government which is wanting to talk its credibility up in the tax space through the Treasury Laws Amendment and through other measures and other bills, and yet on the same hand, on the other hand, I should say, on the other hand, then stop live sheep exports and cruel that industry, which has been going for many, many decades, and particularly profitable for West Australian farmers, many of whom know nothing else. That's what they do for a living. And so what does the government do? It puts more than $100 million on the table in the last budget as the highest expenditure item for the Labor government in agriculture in the 24-25 budget was to shut down an industry, to stop doing something, to stop our farmers doing what they do best in the whole world. And of course, this Labor government, which in the not the last budget but the one before, when we had a treasurer who for the very first time in 25 years couldn't bring himself to use the word infrastructure, but also talked about the things that we sell overseas. And I put that in quotes because the things that we sell overseas, primarily, yes, agriculture, but mainly the big ticket items, the big profit-making items at the moment are iron ore and coal. And of course he can't bring himself to say that because then he doesn't want those Greens in those inner city electorates saying how terrible that is that you've got a treasurer running around using that four-letter word, coal. Now, after weeks of speculation, Australians still don't know with real clarity if the Prime Minister or the Treasurer will impose more broken promise tax hikes. They do not know that. But I note with interest that there is a flurry of activity around the chamber, around the parliament in the past 24 hours, and one just suspects, one just gets this little inkling that there might be an election coming before we know it. Now, it is due before the end of May, we all know that, but you just get the sense that Labor's hurriedly getting the deck chairs sort of in line. Let's hope that you know, for his sake, that the Prime Minister is not like Captain Smith on the Titanic. But voters out there are concerned. They are concerned because they think back to what it was like pre-May 2022, when a house was more affordable, when going to the supermarket didn't mean that you needed to almost extend the mortgage, when filling up at the petrol station, albeit petrol prices at Wagga Wagga at the moment are the cheapest in the state, but they are. It's good. But generally speaking, fuel prices have been way too high. The cost of living has gone through the roof, and people do not feel as though they are better off now than what they were prior to this government coming in. This government has pushed prices up and up and up, and the inflation is on Labor's watch. It's on the member for Rankin's watch. Challenged in Parliament on the 8th of October, the Treasurer said, "We've made it really clear that our policy is not to knock off negative gearing or the capital gains discount." Well, we'll believe that when we see it. Does this mean no change? Does it mean some change? What does it actually mean? Does it mean that negative gearing stands to be gutted under Labor, remaining in name only? I hear. You know, and the member for Griffith might actually have a chat to some of his Greens colleagues who own more houses than the average Australian. He might just have a chat to his deputy leader, Senator Faruqi, who recently bulldozed some trees at I think it was her Port Macquarie property. Just to you know, I mean we talk about hypocrisy. There it is, writ large. There it is, absolutely writ large. But this is of concern to many Australians who've worked hard, who are property investors. And why shouldn't people be able to invest? I know under your communist regime, you'd love everybody just wealth to be distributed. But you know, in a capitalist country like Australia, in a free and fair democracy, people are entitled to earn money and then to spend that money on what they like, rather than have to give it to somebody who doesn't want to work, who doesn't want to actually do anything for a living, and then who expects to hand out from the government. And let me tell you, the biggest concern over whether it's the Treasury Laws Amendment or whether it's any other tax policy is that the Greens never get any say on the Treasury benches of this country. Because if they do, then God help us all, and God help those property investors, God help anybody who has any investment or any money tucked away anywhere, because the Greens will come for it. And Labor could do very well could do very well and very nicely, thank you very much, if they put the Greens last on their ballot paper. Take a leaf out. I'm not finished yet, so don't stand. But take a leaf out of my book. Have a look at any of my how to vote cards in any of the elections that I've ever run. The Greens have always been last, will always be last.